I'm going to try something different this week. A shorter, punchier, explicable video on an aviation topic that's been requested many times in the comments section. Today we're going to explain how a simple aircraft engine works. Now there are many different types of aircraft engines, and today we were going to focus on the most common type found on single-engine piston aircraft. The horizontally opposed air-cooled four-stroke two-cylinder engine like the UL Power 520 is that I have here. Before we get into how the engine works, we first need to understand the four basic strokes or steps that the engine goes through in order to make power. First we have intake, then compression, combustion, and exhaust. In the intake stroke, the piston moves downward and atmospheric pressure from above pushes the mixture of fuel and air into the cylinder through the intake valve, which is located at the top of the cylinder. As the piston reaches the bottom of the cylinder, the intake valve closes and the piston begins to move upward on the compression stroke. As the piston moves upward, the shrinking space within the cylinder increases the pressure and temperature of the fuel mixture. When the mixture is at its highest pressure and temperature, it's ready for ignition. A spark jumps the gap in the spark plug, creating combustion. The burning of the fuel mixture creates a tremendous amount of energy, expanding rapidly and forcing the piston back down in what is called the power stroke. At the bottom of this stroke, the exhaust valve opens, and near the top of the stroke, the intake valve opens, and the cycle begins again. The crankshaft attached to the piston takes the reciprocating or back and forth motion of the piston and converts it into rotating motion. The rotating motion of the crankshaft is then transferred to the propeller through the propeller shaft and the engine mounts. Now let's go through the four strokes again. But this time with the animation moving at the speed that it would actually happen. During the intake stroke, the piston moves downward and a fresh charge of fuel and air is pulled into the cylinder. As the piston reaches the bottom of the cylinder, the intake valve closes and the compression stroke begins. As the piston moves upward, the fuel mixture is compressed and the exhaust valve opens. On the next cycle, the spark plug ignites the fuel mixture and the power stroke begins. As the piston moves downward, the burning fuel mixture expands and forces the piston back up. Near the top of the stroke, the intake valve opens and the cycle begins again. Obviously, for an engine to keep running, there needs to be a continuous supply of fuel and air to the engine. Air is drawn into the engine through the air filter and the carburetor or fuel injection system. The carburetor or fuel injector then mixes the correct amount of fuel with the air before it enters the cylinder. Once the fuel is mixed with the air, it's pushed into the cylinder on the intake stroke. The crankshaft, which is connected to the piston, has a cam attached to it. The cam, along with the valves, push rods, and rocker arms, controls the opening and closing of the intake and exhaust valves. The cam is also responsible for opening the throttle, which controls the speed of the engine. The engine produces its power in the combustion chamber where the cylinders, pistons, valves, and spark plugs are all located. The combustion chamber is where the fuel and air mixture is compressed and ignited. The energy produced by the combustion of the fuel mixture is what forces the piston back and forth, which ultimately turns the propeller and moves the airplane forward. Many general aviation engines are air-cooled, meaning that the air passing over the cylinders cools the engine. Some aircraft engines, however, are liquid-cooled, meaning that a liquid, usually water, is used to cool the engine. Liquid-cooled engines typically have a radiator and a pump to circulate the coolant. That about wraps it up. Hopefully you learned how an aircraft engine works. Till next time, keep the blue side up.